April 1943. The war in North Africa was collapsing. In a forgotten olive grove near Tunis, a monster of steel lay silent, abandoned yet still radiating power. Its massive turret was frozen mid-turn, its thick armor scarred by gunfire. For the Allied soldiers who stumbled upon it, the sight was like staring into the future of war. What they found that day wasn't just another tank. It was something the world had only heard whispers about, the legendary Tiger Y. And this one, marked Tiger 712, would become the most important war machine ever captured intact from Nazi Germany. The British troops moved cautiously through the grove, rifles ready. The air was heavy with the smell of oil, smoke, and crushed earth. The last German forces had fled toward Tunis only hours earlier. The war here was almost over, but something about this place felt wrong. Too quiet. Then came the shout, "Tank!" "There's a tank up ahead." The soldiers advanced slowly, brushing aside branches and olive leaves until they saw it, half hidden by trees, its gray hull coated in dust. Its cannon, long and thick, pointed toward nothing, as if waiting for an order that would never come. No one moved for a moment. The crew hatches were open, smoke still rising from the engine deck. Whoever had been inside had left in a hurry. At first glance, it looked like a heavy Panzer, maybe a new variant. But as the troops circled it, realization dawned. This wasn't like any tank they'd seen before. The armor was nearly double the thickness of the Shermans and Churchills that fought alongside them. The tracks were broad, built to crush through mud and rubble. And the gun, an 80 artillery cannon, was the same weapon feared by Allied pilots in the sky. The men had heard stories, rumors from the Russian front, of German tanks that could destroy anything before it even came into range. They called them Tigers, but until that moment, most Allied soldiers thought those were just stories. Now standing before the silent wreck, they realized the stories were real. The British engineers were called in. Cameras were set up. Every inch of the tank was examined. Its suspension, its armor, its strange overlapping wheels. The engineers couldn't believe it. This machine wasn't just built, it was crafted, like a weapon forged by obsession. When they checked the serial number, their suspicions were confirmed. This was indeed a Tiger Rose, a model still so new that few had ever been seen outside the Eastern Front. Its number, 712. Its capture, a once-in-a-war opportunity. As the news spread through Allied command, interest turned to excitement and then to alarm. Because this wasn't just a trophy, this was a window into how far Nazi engineering had advanced. Every bolt, every weld, every piece of armor told a story, and the Allies were determined to read it. While most tanks were treated as disposable machines, this one was guarded day and night. Engineers from the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers Corps arrived, along with intelligence officers and even camera crews. They began to document every detail. The hull plates, 100 millimeters thick in places. The gun sight, so precise it could hit a moving target at over a kilometer. The turret rotation, smooth even when damaged. One British officer was overheard saying, "If this is what they're building now, God help us when they make more." But the Tiger wasn't invincible, and Tiger 712 had the scars to prove it. On its left flank, a shell had struck near the drive sprocket. The impact didn't penetrate, but it had damaged the tracks. Perhaps that's why it was abandoned. The crew likely realized escape was their only option as British armor closed in. Inside, the engineers found personal effects, maps, ration tins, even a half-burned diary written in German. One passage described the frustration of keeping the Tiger running. "It is strong, yes, but every kilometer feels like 10. The weight eats the engine. The roads hate us." That diary revealed something critical. The Tiger's power came with a heavy price: reliability. Still, the psychological effect of this discovery was massive. To the Allies, the Tiger represented the ultimate challenge. To the Germans it had been a symbol of invincibility. And now, one of their prized machines sat silent in an Allied field, surrounded by curious eyes. The legend of Tiger 712 had begun. Before Tiger 712 stood abandoned among the olive trees, its story had begun thousands of kilometers away, in the factories of Germany, where engineers were racing against time and fear. By late 1942, the war had shifted. The Germans were losing ground in Russia, their once unstoppable blitzkrieg slowing to a crawl in the mud and snow. The Soviets had rolled out their own monster, the T-34, a tank faster, cheaper, and tougher than anything the Wehrmacht had expected. When Hitler received reports that German shells were bouncing off the T-34's armor, he was furious. He demanded a new machine, something that would make the world tremble again. His order was simple: build me a tank that cannot be destroyed. And so began the creation of the Panzerkampfwagen 6 Tiger. It was not designed for speed or simplicity. It was designed for fear. Its 80-meter gun, originally an anti-aircraft weapon, could pierce almost any armor on Earth. Its armor was so thick that few Allied weapons could even scratch it, but it came at a cost: complexity. The Tiger wasn't a tank you could mass-produce. It was a mechanical masterpiece that demanded precision and care. Every one of its 54 tons was a challenge for the German supply chain. Each tank took weeks to build, required hundreds of man-hours, and consumed enough fuel to supply a small convoy. Still, Hitler didn't care. He believed the Tiger would change the war. And perhaps for a time, it did. While hundreds of Tigers rolled toward the Eastern Front, a small number were chosen for another mission: to turn the tide in North Africa, where Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, was struggling against the growing might of the British Eighth Army. Rommel's army was skilled but outgunned. His once lightning-fast panzer divisions were being cornered. The Allies had more planes, more fuel, and more tanks. The desert, once his ally, had turned into a trap. When the first Tiger tanks arrived in Tunisia in late 1942, they were meant to be his salvation, a secret weapon that could break through British armor and push them back to the sea. For the soldiers of the Africa Corps, the arrival of the Tiger was like seeing a god descend onto the battlefield. One German mechanic later recalled, "When we first saw it, we didn't believe it could move. It was too large, too heavy, but when its engine roared to life, the ground shook. We thought, maybe this will save us, and for a while it seemed possible." In their first battles, Tigers devastated Allied tanks from distances the enemy couldn't even return fire. Reports from British tank crews spoke of shells ricocheting harmlessly off Tiger armor, of comrades destroyed in a single hit. The Allies gave it nicknames: the Beast, the Monster, the Ghost Tank. But behind the fear, cracks were already forming. The Tigers in Africa suffered constant mechanical failures. Their complex gearboxes hated the desert heat. Sand clogged the filters. The heavy armor sank into soft terrain, making recovery nearly impossible. The Africa Corps had to tow them using multiple vehicles, sometimes even using other Tigers, just to move one machine. And fuel? The Tiger drank it faster than any supply line could deliver. Every kilometer burned through precious reserves that Rommel no longer had. As one officer wrote bitterly, "The Tiger wins battles we can no longer afford to fight." By early 1943, the war in North Africa was collapsing. Rommel had retreated into Tunisia, his forces trapped between the advancing British from the east and the newly arrived Americans from the west. The Tiger units fought bravely, but they were too few to change the outcome. At the Battle of Taburba, Tiger 712 and its company engaged British armor head-on. It destroyed multiple enemy tanks before suffering damage to its tracks. The crew attempted repairs, but Allied pressure grew too intense. By the end of April, Rommel was gone, recalled to Germany. His army was exhausted, his supplies gone. The order came: withdraw. Leave behind what you must, and so Near Tunis, one Tiger was left behind, its crew escaping on foot as British forces closed in. That Tiger was number 712. The capture of Tiger 712 marked the end of one story and the beginning of another. For the Allies, this was their first real chance to study the most feared tank in the world, and what they learned would change how the next 2 years of the war were fought. When British engineers first climbed inside the captured Tiger, they expected to find chaos. A burned-out shell, perhaps even booby traps left behind. But what they found instead was a marvel of German engineering. The interior was cramped but meticulously organized. Dials and gauges lined the walls. Every lever, every switch had purpose. Even in defeat, the machine radiated pride. The driver's compartment was tight, barely enough room for movement. Behind him, the massive Maybach HL230 engine rested like the heart of a sleeping animal. 700 horsepower of raw mechanical fury. One engineer later remarked, "It's not a tank. It's a cathedral of steel." The team from the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers Corps began their work systematically. Every bolt, every piece of wiring was photographed, labeled, and documented. The aim was not just to understand the Tiger, but to learn how to defeat it. The first surprise came when they examined the armor. Using precision calipers, they measured it. Over 100 millimeters thick on the front, 80 on the sides. In tests, even their best anti-tank guns struggled to penetrate it. The only weak spots were near the rear and the underside, both nearly impossible to hit in combat. To the Allies, it was both terrifying and fascinating. The Tiger wasn't just protection, it was intimidation. Next came the gun. The legendary 8.8 cm KWK-36 L-56. It was based on the same 88mm cannon that had already earned a reputation as an aircraft killer and tank destroyer. Allied officers had faced it before, but seeing it mounted on a turret was another matter entirely. At the testing grounds, they loaded it with captured German shells and fired at range. The results were staggering. At 1,500 meters, it could destroy a Churchill tank in one shot. At 2,000 meters, it could still punch through the frontal armor of a Sherman. No Allied tank in 1943 had that kind of reach. As one report concluded grimly, "The Tiger does not fight. It hunts." But power came at a cost. When engineers studied the turret rotation and elevation, they found it relied on a hydraulic system powered by the main engine. That meant the turret could only turn effectively when the engine was running, a dangerous limitation in the heat of battle. The suspension, too, was intricate, a complex arrangement of interleaved road wheels designed for stability, but nearly impossible to repair in the field. Removing a single damaged wheel could require taking off several others first. A nightmare for mechanics, especially under fire. Then came the issue of weight. The Tiger was heavy, too heavy. Weighing in at over 54 tons, it was nearly double the mass of a Sherman. On soft terrain, it often bogged down. Bridges collapsed under it. Transporting it required special railcars, and maintenance crews constantly battled breakdowns. Even the Germans, known for their precision, struggled to keep the Tigers running. From the diary found inside Tiger 712, one entry stood out: "We fight the desert more than the enemy. The heat cooks the oil, the sand eats the tracks. The tank is strong, but the earth hates it." Those words echoed the engineer's own findings. The Tiger was a masterpiece, but one unsuited for the harsh realities of prolonged war. Still, the Allies couldn't afford to dismiss it. At secret proving grounds, they ran firing tests against Tiger 712's hull using their own weapons. The results were sobering. The British 6-pounder gun, useless at most ranges. The American 75mm could only penetrate the sides at close distance. Even the new 17-pounder, Britain's most powerful tank gun, had to hit just the right angle to cause serious damage. The conclusion was clear. If more Tigers appeared on the battlefield, the Allies would be in real danger. Urgent cables were sent to London, Washington, and even to the design teams developing new Allied tanks. The message was blunt. Armor and firepower must increase. The Tiger has set a new standard. The British accelerated their 17-pounder program, leading to the creation of the Sherman Firefly, a modified tank that could finally kill a Tiger at long range. The Americans began work on the M26 Pershing, a heavy tank that wouldn't see battle until the war's final months. And in the Soviet Union, engineers pushed the IS series of tanks, designed to go head-to-head with German heavies. In a sense, Tiger 712 had done more than fight battles. It had changed how every army designed tanks for the rest of the war. But perhaps the most revealing part of the inspection came from the human touches left behind inside the turret. A faded photograph of a young woman tucked near the gunner's seat. A small wooden cross carved from tank parts hanging from a bolt. A note scrawled in pencil on the inside of a hatch. Wenn du das liest, sind wir schon fort. If you are reading this, we are already gone. Even in this machine built for destruction, there was a trace of humanity. The lives of men who once believed they were invincible, now reduced to ghosts inside a silent tank. When the engineers completed their tests, Tiger 712 was no longer just a tank. It had become a teacher. For months, Allied experts studied every secret it revealed. Drawings were copied, metal samples tested, reports circulated among the highest levels of command. Every new Allied tank project in 1943 carried a quiet note at the top of its file. Lessons from captured German Tiger 712. This one wreck, left behind in a Tunisian olive grove, had reshaped the world's understanding of armored warfare. Yet even as its blueprints and measurements were studied in clean British workshops, the truth about the Tiger was more complex. The Tiger I was brilliant, but it was also doomed by its brilliance. It demanded resources Germany could no longer spare: rare metals, precision tools, and mechanics skilled enough to maintain a watchmaker's nightmare under battlefield chaos. In a war measured by quantity, not perfection, the Tiger was a paradox, an over-engineered masterpiece fighting against the clock. By late 1944, as Allied forces pushed through France, the once terrifying legend of the Tiger began to fade. There were never enough of them. Each one destroyed was a blow Germany couldn't recover from. And as factories were bombed and fuel disappeared, even the finest machines were left idle, their engines silent for lack of oil. The Allies, armed with Fireflies, Pershings, and air superiority, finally turned the hunter into the hunted, but none of those victories would have come as quickly without Tiger 712's quiet sacrifice. The day the Allies first opened its hatches and saw how the future of war was built. In post-war years, the Tiger became legend. Its name alone inspired fear and fascination. Museums built exhibits around its story. Writers called it the king of the battlefield. Gamers, filmmakers, and historians still argue over its legacy. Was it the greatest tank ever built, or simply the most famous failure of over-engineering? Perhaps both, because the Tiger proves something larger than war itself. Perfection on paper means little without endurance in the real world. A British officer who had examined Tiger 712 later said in an interview, decades after the war, "It wasn't the tank that frightened us. It was what it represented, a glimpse of how far man would go to build the perfect weapon." And that's the haunting truth. Tiger 712 was not just a machine. It was a mirror, reflecting the obsession, brilliance, and madness of a world at war. Today, only a handful of real Tigers remain, preserved behind ropes and glass. Their paint has faded, their engines silent, but when visitors stand before them, they often feel the same chill the British soldiers felt in 1943, a sense that this machine, even in death, still holds power. In that quiet moment, The olive grove returns in the smell of oil and dust. The echo of engines, the ghosts of men who built, fought, and fled. And in the center of it all, one number still carries its legacy, Tiger 712.